G'day legends, I hope that you are having a really great day. Now, this video is going to be out a little bit later as I'm working a bit later today because I was doing a thing with some of like the more traditional media in Adelaide today and talking about my experience in both Israel and Ukraine. Anyway, it has been now a few days since I've talked about Israel and a fair bit has happened. So we're going to go over some of that. Now, of course, last time we spoke, the ceasefire had just been extended another 48 hours. Now, since the weekend and now that we're into the next week, the ceasefire has ended with over 100 hostages being freed. And we've had some unbelievable footage like this come out where we see these small cameras that seem to be peeking up and watching Israeli soldiers released by Hamas. Now, I don't know that much about what is actually happening here, but from the sound, it does sound like a little peek hole, like spy camera-y thing, or it sounds like a microphone that is like on a GoPro or something, but maybe a lot smaller. That was the first giveaway for me, was actually the audio of this and, of course, the quality. But a lot of people saying this is probably within the ceasefire, operating in tunnels beneath and sticking this up like a peek hole somewhere as well. But it is bloody concerning if I was one of the IDF soldiers. Even if it's during the ceasefire, it doesn't matter that they're within meters, within feet of you. It's unbelievable footage that's come out and does show the scale of that tunnel network that is underneath Gaza, what the IDF are battling with currently. And let's have a look now at how many hostages that Hamas still hold. So there's still 137 hostages being held by Hamas. 17 of them are women and children. Now, in this number, we don't know the proof of life. We don't know how many are living, hopefully all of them, but we're not exactly sure in this, as these numbers could be skewed a lot because Hamas has said that Israel has killed over 50 from their air campaign. So we're not 100% sure. This was shared recently by Israeli Defence Force on Twitter. So we're sort of unsure. But Hamas has said that there will be no further return of hostages until Israel's aggression against Gaza has stopped. Now, this comes as reports today from the IDF say that 82 Israeli soldiers have now been killed in Gaza since the beginning of the ground operation. So, of course, those numbers have gone up, but those numbers are nowhere near, not even in the ballpark of what I thought that we would see in this fighting on the ground operation once they entered Gaza, in how tight everything is in there, how dense it is, into the tunnels, into the buildings, the urban warfare. Because as you know, in urban warfare, that your armor, all of this doesn't really give you that much of an advantage in urban battle, except unless you really flatten things, then it gives you a lot of advantage. So those numbers are significantly lower, which is a great thing, but than what we thought, but they will continue to go up, as we know, as well as, reported death does take a while to come through. So that number may be one too low. We're not really certain, but it's way lower than I thought it would be. I know earlier on I said it would be the hundreds or into the thousands once it rolled in, down into the tunnels, into the buildings. But of course, we've seen over a month of that air campaign going on, flattening things, and of course then rolling in bulldozers, tanks, and that armor has far more effect when you've completely flattened an area for the infantry as well than if you're rolling into somewhere. A good example of this to see how armor can get really caught out in urban build-up is look at when Russia went into Grozny. There's really good documentaries on YouTube about that, talk about how armor can actually be the worst thing to happen there. But since the ceasefire has ended, heavy fighting has continued, and the IDF has actually said that it's the most intense fighting since the beginning of their ground operation, as Israel continues its huge artillery missile barrage into Gaza, and from rotary ring Apache as well. And the ground forces are moving more and more into the center and actually opening then a new axis on the south. And we will look over the maps just in a second. And of course, this new southern axis, this has really sparked fear into a lot of people as the increased operations in the south, because that's where a lot of people have then fled down to the south. So I'll show you exactly where we're actually talking about. And we've got War Mapper, the live UA map, but it's the Israel version. And we'll just have a look at where this is here. So Of course, this is where we have been speaking about in the north of Gaza, that this was taken on three sides. Well, of course, then the sides of this is just Israel here. Now, we were down in Sderot here. This is right pretty much on this corner is where you and I had all the live streams, and these are the axis that Israel has pulled in on and surrounded all the areas and fighting into more areas here. But then is this then push down in the south, pushing into here, and this is where a lot of people are concerned. And we're going to speak a little bit over that, but it's just interesting to get your head around where that is. Syriac showing pretty much the exact same here that War Mapper are. Let's have a look at this. Now, we can't go street to street, of course, because War Mapper doesn't show that much detail, but looks very, very similar here, except just on the northern sort of bubble out here. But we will get more confirmation of that. And Syriac has said the IDF reached Flour Mills intersection at this grid, thus confirming Saladin Road is cut there. Now, Gaza civilians only have Al Rashid Road to head from the north Gaza towards the Rafah crossing. Of course, Rafah is down then into Egypt. So this is what we're talking about, that this could be a concern. Now, this is where we're talking about right down in here. Now, all three of these maps are showing slightly different. I believe the most up-to-date is probably this one. That said, with the Live UA map, I've had some concern about their map before in Ukraine, and like everything, take multiple sources and see where we go. But what they're talking about is that this road is then cut off by Israel. Now, will humanitarian efforts be able to move through here? I believe so, that civilians may also be able to move through here, but saying that these roads in here may be the only way for the people of Gaza to move down. And of course, like we're saying, being told to move south into humanitarian areas here, and then this push in here, this has led to a lot of further concern for the humanitarian disaster happening there. Now that the IDF has ordered the evacuation of a fifth of the Khan Yunis, which has seen a massive influx of displaced people from the north. Of course, Khan Yunis here, so they have said that they are ordering the evacuation of a fifth of this area, pushing down. And like people have said, well, people are pushed into here, now they're being pushed again. Where does this ultimately go? Now, Lynn Hastings of the UN Humanitarian Corridor for Occupied Palestinian Territory has said, nowhere is safe in Gaza and there is nowhere left to go. The conditions required to deliver aid to the people of Gaza do not exist. If possible, an even more hellish scenario is about to unfold, one in which humanitarian operations may not be able to respond. What we see today are shelters with no capacity, a health system on its knees, a lack of clean drinking water, no proper sanitation, and poor nutrition for people already mentally and physically exhausted. A textbook formula for epidemics and a public health disaster. Now, if that name sounds familiar to you today, it's because Israel this week, and then today it's been more public about it, has not renewed her visa to work. So let's have a look over this in here. So this is from the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We will no longer be silent in the face of the bias of the United Nations. I decided to revoke the residence visa to Israel of the UN Humanitarian Coordinator Lynn Hastings, someone who did not condemn Hamas for the brutal massacre of 1,200 Israelis, for the kidnapping of babies and the elderly, and for the horrific acts of abuse and I don't know if I can say that on here or not. I don't know what I could do. And for using the residents of Gaza as human shields, but instead condemns Israel, a democratic country that protects its citizens, cannot serve in the UN and cannot enter Israel. So, of course, not permitting that visa to go on there. Now, one thing that we definitely have seen further in this as well, speaking of humanitarian disasters in here, is it less than half of the amount of trucks that were crossing in the ceasefire have come through post-ceasefire. Of course, that makes sense, but we do know that so much aid is needed into Gaza and it's just not getting through for a whole amount of reasons. Now, we know that the hospitals are overwhelmed, as the civilian casualties reported by Hamas are now over 15,000. Now, Majina Spoljarek, the president of the International Committee of the Red Cross, has then had this to say on social media.
I have just visited the European Gaza hospital, and the things I saw there is beyond anything that anyone should be in a position to describe. What shocked me the most were the children with atrocious injuries and at the same time having lost their parents with no one looking after them. We are facing a situation here that will not be healed by sending in more trucks. We need to provide protection to the civilians in Gaza, to the women and children, to the elderly people that I saw today that have nowhere to go. The majority of people I met today have been displaced several times. I met people who have lost limbs because they needed to evacuate between treatments, and they lost a hand or a foot because they couldn't be treated in the hospital where they arrived first. I was told today that the North has lost its entire surgical capacity. We have to find solutions to this. We can't turn away from what is evidently a moral failure in the face of the international community. I'm calling on all parties, on everyone who has an influence, to de-escalate and to find the military solutions to what is an immense suffering of the people on both sides. We have to protect the rights of the people. We have to protect the rights of the civilians. We have to protect the rights of the detainees. We have to protect the rights of the hostages. The ICRC will do its utmost to help alleviate and reduce the suffering, but we can't do this alone. And there's not only a humanitarian solution to this, there must be a political one.
So, of course, from the Red Cross there, but is this just caught in a gridlock that Hamas has said no more hostages will be released unless the aggression stops from Israel, but Israel is saying that they will not stop and won't even come to the table unless the hostages are released. And at the end of the day, these hostages were taken hostage because they are Jewish. The people being handed back, now maybe unfairly in some cases, taken through military court without a jury, but they were taken into custody, into prison for committing, well, what they say are crimes, not just their ethnicity. So that I believe there is a difference there between the prisoners and then the hostages too. But we're definitely caught in that gridlock. But I'd like the other surrounding Arab countries to really stand up too and help with the humanitarian crisis that is, well, not unfolding. It's already unfolded. It unfolded day one. That is happening in Gaza, as these people deserve the human rights, but so do the hostages, the children, the babies, hostages that Hamas is holding as well. And there's definitely, you know, people on far ends of both sides of this coin. But, you know, this can come to the table if both sides somewhat come to the table. And I think the very first step in that is definitely the release of the hostages, at least in my book. Now, a retired RAF, so Royal Australian Air Force group captain, which is a upper of the senior ranks, has then had this to say with ABC Australia. So Middle East expert Royal RAF captain Dr. Peter Leighton says Israel's strategy is to displace as many Palestinian people as possible. I disagree with that there, but let's see what has happened to ensure the whole population of Gaza realises the impact of the October 7th attacks by Hamas. So I can see where that's going, that people have to realise that the impact of that and supporting Hamas isn't going to, you know, end well. I see that, but I think to just displace everyone creates an issue for Israel as well. But let's go over what this has said. It seems that Israel has displaced about 2 million people, so pretty much everybody is displaced. I think by the end of this war, we'll have 1.5 or 1.6 million who are dehoused, and that's, I think, behind the Israeli strategy to dehouse as many people as they can, so that everybody in Gaza understands that the October 7th attack, the Israelis were not happy, so everybody gets impacted. And this goes into what a lot of people will say, no matter whose bomb it is, that Hamas is responsible for that. A lot of people will say that. So we have this horrendous problem where very soon, at the end of this conflict, in a few weeks' time, there will be 2 million people who are refugees. Now, end of this conflict, 2 weeks' time, a few weeks' time, we're not sure, although there has been rumors coming out of America that it is to be wrapped up in the first week of January, but we are unsure. Dr. Leighton says while Israel is hoping to kill or capture all of the Hamas militants, their strategy of destruction is also to make a psychological impact on the people of Gaza. I can get that. That's where you see the jets doing circles sometimes. I think it's very much a psychological impact that everyone in Gaza realizes what has happened and it impacts them directly, them and their families. You have to bear in mind, Gaza is a small place. There are 2 million people, probably as Hamas had been practicing their October 7th attack for almost 12 months. As we now find out, a lot of people in Gaza were very likely knew that this was going to happen. And I think what he's more getting at here is you have to show people, if you're going to support Hamas, this is what's going to happen. That it has to be a change from within. So the Israelis will be hoping that after this, I hate to say lesson, if you like, that the people living in Gaza will make sure that Hamas or successor group to Hamas doesn't do this again, at least for a while. But that can absolutely have a backflip and absolutely just radicalize a whole new generation as well. That dropping bombs may not just have this, holy shit, we can't support this. You can go, we need to support this because look at that. And I think that is actually more likely than the other way. Look at Afghanistan, that the complete failure of our objective there to go there, win hearts and minds, and you need to push back against this to now completely in control of the country. But I do think that it is interesting, and I'd really do appreciate him putting that out. I'm actually going to reach out and see if he'll actually chat to me, I guess, in depth about this. Now, a lot of people, particularly when I was there, when we talked a lot about the tunnels and the operations going in, talked about the potential of actually flooding the tunnels, as we have seen this prior. So this was from Reuters in 2015 when Egypt did drowns Gaza's tunnel business. So we've seen this happen before. Now, we then have had this video here come out, apparently off a captured Hamas GoPro. So you can see the water on the floor, and then very quickly, hear it coming. Either that's the air pushing through. Something's collapsed or been blown in, and then a huge influx of water here. So coming straight down too, so something down into the tunnels as well. And unsure of the fate of this Hamas militant there. But then we've had more footage coming up from the other side. Now, I have this Google Translator, but I don't have it in my notes right now, but I will put it over the top of exactly what this then says. But people saying from the other side, and we can see here, water, big pumps here, pumping salt water down into the tunnels off the beach. So can be potentially pumping massive, massive amounts of water in with those industrial-sized pumps. So it does look like the first footage we're getting of flooding of those tunnels. Now, importantly, in the news today, the IDF has apologized as Israeli troops reportedly have opened fire on what they believe to be a Hezbollah position in Lebanon, but instead struck an outpost of the Lebanese army, which resulted in the death of one soldier and several others injured, and we don't know the severity of those injuries of those soldiers. And the incident is now under formal investigation. This is what they said earlier today. IDF soldiers operated in self-defense to eliminate an imminent threat. Wasn't that imminent, that had been identified from Lebanon. The threat was identified within a known launch area and observation point of the Hezbollah terrorist organizations near Al-Awadi. Hezbollah's activities in Lebanon are in clear violation of the UN Security Council Resolution 17001. UN's not going to do much. The IDF was notified that soldiers from the Lebanese armed forces were harmed during the strike. The Lebanese armed forces were not the target of the strike. The IDF expresses regret over the incident. The incident is now under review. Now, people will say, why is Lebanese army there? Why can't Lebanese army get on top of Hezbollah? Hezbollah is very, very powerful. They are a real threat in that whole area, that whole region. Lebanon has been rocked by much misfortune, bad handling, and really on the verge of bankruptcy, and the army is not that powerful. And Hezbollah is more powerful in at least a lot of regions there too, but operating the same. absolutely those can happen. But small miscalculations like this can be absolutely the first flap of the wings of the butterfly effect into a wider scale conflict, as the Lebanese army really does struggle with Hezbollah themselves. So we've seen attacks from Hezbollah basically non-stop since Hamas crossed into Israel on the 7th of October, and of course Israel fighting back there as well. But it's just one of those big stuff-ups that is a really bad look. Now, as well, the Iranian state media has released this video taken from a drone on November the 26th, showing a drone circling the Eisenhower carrier strike. Oh my God, I'm hiccuping. Carrier strike group in the Persian Gulf. So let's have a look then over this. And to be honest, I'm actually very impressed these can actually get this close and get footage like this of the strike group. I dare say the strike group knew exactly where the drone was. We don't know the fate of this drone, but I do think that this is actually impressive that they can even get this footage. Now, how legitimate is this footage? Well, I don't know. I'm going off that it seems legit, but I actually do think that this is very impressive. Of course, we can see the F-18s on the deck, rotary wing on the deck. You can just see the sheer scale of the American bloody aircraft carriers is just insane. Now, someone said one of these ships is actually French as well. I'm not a naval expert, but correct me if I'm correct or incorrect on that. So, of course, one of the insane carriers here. So, I think it is impressive, concerning that they can actually get this amount of footage here too, but I dare say it was definitely tracked. We know the amount of technology aboard a whole strike group is insane of what they can actually get. Now, speaking of, let's go into speaking of boats. So this was, at least we're going over a couple of days. Now, we know there has been more strikes against civilian ships as well, especially if they've got any Israeli affiliations. So today there were 4 attacks against 3 separate commercial vessels operating in international waters in the southern Red Sea. These 3 vessels are connected to 14 separate nations. The Arleigh Burke class destroyer USS Carney responded to the distress calls from the ships and provided assistance. And we're going to go over the boats anyway. At approximately 0915 Sana time, the Carney detected an anti-ship ballistic missile attack fired from a Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen toward the MV Unity Explorer, impacting in the vicinity of the vessel. Unity Explorer in the Bahamas flagged UK-owned and operated bulk cargo ship crewed by sailors of 2 nations. The Carney was conducting a patrol of the Red Sea, detected the attack on the Unity Explorer at 12 p.m. While in international waters. Carney engaged and shot down a UAV launched from Houthi controlled areas in Yemen. The drone was headed towards Carney, although its specific target was not clear. We cannot assess at this time whether the Carney was the target of the UAVs. There was no damage to the US vessel or injuries to personnel. In a separate attack at approximately 12:35, Unity Explorer reported that they were struck by a missile fired from Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen. Carney responded to the distress call while assisting with the damage assessment. Carney detected another inbound UAV, destroying the drone with no damage or injuries on the Carney or Unity Explorer. Unity Explorer reported minor damage from the missile strike. At 3:30 p.m., 24-hour time. The MV number 9 was struck by a missile fired from Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen while operating in international shipping lanes in the Red Sea. The Panamanian-flagged Bermuda and UK-owned and operated bulk carrier reported damage, no casualties. At 4:30 p.m., the MV Sophie 2 was sent a distress call stating that they were struck by a missile. So they are getting strikes on these ships here. Again responded to the distress call and reported no significant damage while en route to render support. Carney shot down a UAV headed in its direction. Sophie 2 is a Panamanian-flagged bulk carrier crewed by sailors from 8 countries. These attacks represent a direct threat to international commerce and maritime international commerce and maritime security. They have jeopardized the lives of international crews representing multiple countries around the world. We also have every reason to believe that these attacks, while launched by the Houthis in Yemen, are fully enabled by Iran. I don't need the Pentagon to fucking tell me that. It's exactly where the missiles come from. The US will consider all appropriate responses in full coordination with its international allies and partners. So the Houthi rebels, of course, backed by Iran. So is Hezbollah, and so then is Hamas. Stuffing around firing at these ships. Now, of course, this is the Unity Explorer. This is the Cote Laju. This is one of the other ones, and this is the Sophie 2 as well. So those are the 3 ships that have been attacked in there. So it is really getting a bit out of control with this also. Now, we'll have a look just over some more footage. As we know, that the IDF is saying they have taken out a lot of Hamas senior leadership. So let's have a look here, that they are saying that these 5 guys here have been eliminated of the senior leadership. And there's videos of some of these guys then walking through the tunnels as well prior to them being eliminated as well. So we have more videos as well, the IDF showing then these tunnel shafts. So right in the beginning, let's look what he says. Front tunnel shaft in a mosque. As we've seen, many mosques, hospitals, things like this being targeted by missiles. And you can see how deep down those actually go here. And then we can see that they are dropping dams down these to then collapse these mine shafts. Not mine shafts, of course they're not mine shafts, these tunnels. But as we've spoken about before, that although the tunnels may be a very strong point, if things get off, they can become absolutely the weakest point as well, because you can just get trapped down there. But we know that these are hundreds of kilometers long, tens of meters deep. They are a very heavily fortified position. We're going to look over some interesting bits in here as well as this statement by the IDF Chief of General Staff. We have moved into the 3rd phase of the ground operations. We have secured many Hamas strongholds in northern Gaza Strip, and we are now operating against in strongholds in the south. So as we know, pushing, we operate professionally, evacuating the population ahead of time from combat zones, striking Hamas from above and below ground, with combined strikes from the air, sea and land. They asked about the destruction of Gaza. Their forces find nearly every building and house, weapons, and many terrorists locate them and engage in combat. Understanding that it's part of the method, and we know it is part of the method to also be amongst the civilian population. That's why it can be so effective.
ומנהל משם את הלחימה. הלחץ הצבאי שאנחנו מפעילים והפעלנו בשבועות האחרונים פוגע בחמאס פגיעה קשה, מקדם את ההשגה של כל מטרות המלחמה ובכלל זה גם את המטרה העליונה של השבת החטופים הביתה. צה"ל על כל מפקדיו וכל חייליו עוסק כל כולו בהשגת מטרות המלחמה. אנחנו, כל חיילי צה"ל, נעשה הכל, לתקן את שנפגע. בשביל החיים, בשביל המשכיות החיים במדינת ישראל, התיקון הזה הוא הכרחי. אנחנו לא נעצור עד שנשלים את המשימה.
Repair what has been damaged, what has happened in Israel, and repair people's trust back in the military, or repair what has actually been done in Gaza with the just massive amount of destruction. Anyway, Legends, I'm going to cut it a little bit short. I had more, but I don't want this to go too bloody long. But Legends, thank you for sticking around. Look after yourselves. If you'd like to support me, links down below, but never feel obliged. Thank you very much. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.